Today's webinar is titled Exploring Silvicultural Strategies in New England, American Beech. Our presenter today is Dr. Arun Bose. Dr. Arun Bose received his PhD in Forest Ecology and Silviculture at the University of Quebec and an MS in Forest and Nature Conservation at Wageningen University, the Netherlands European Forestry University of Eastern Finland. He is a postdoc research associate in the School of Forest Resources at the University of Maine. He is the author of numerous peer-reviewed journal articles, as well as has been awarded the 2014 Percy Stubbs, John Bolton King, and Edward Garfitt Prize for Silviculture. His research includes modeling natural regeneration dynamics across forest types of the Northeast, classifying and modeling mixed hardwood stands to understand the effect of beech bark disease on stand dynamics and species composition of the Northeastern forests. We're fortunate to have him today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to you, Arun.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks, Kate and the organizer for giving me this opportunity. As you can see, I have an accent, so if some things remains unclear, the interpretation, please feel free to ask questions, or you can also write me emails. I provided here my email address. So yeah, so today we will talk on American beech and what management strategies that we could use to better manage American beech and associated species in New England. I cannot change my slide.
Arun, yeah, there you go.
So yes, okay, so to see the outline of today's talk, so first I will give you an overview on American beech and associated species, and then I will talk on regeneration dynamics of beech and associated species. So these are like sugar maple, birch, red maple over the past 3 decades. So how the regeneration composition has changed over time. And then I will talk on the stand types where we have beech. So looking more on stand structural and compositional characteristics. So where beech is a minor component to the stands, where beech is a major component. And then we will also see on the biotic and abiotic factors that currently driving the expansion of beech. So the associated factors with a stance where beech is a minor component to the stance where beech is a major component. Then I will also present an experiment that was established by Professor Robert Wagner in central Maine back in 2006, where he sprayed glyphosate herbicide, and then I analyzed the response of beech and associated species to that treatment 9 years after the experiment. And then I will also provide management recommendation to better manage beech in the northern hardwoods. Okay, so let's start with beech. If we see the natural distribution range of this species, we can see it's if you follow me, my mouse, we can see that it's from southern Quebec. From southern Quebec here, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec, then Maine, and then throughout the Northeast, and we have until the top of Florida. So it's the distribution mainly the eastern part of United States and the southeastern part of Canada. And here is a picture I put here, which you can is a beech stands where we have many stems with beech bark disease. There's a phenomena that really makes beech as a less commercially desirable species. Now, if we sometimes it gets really slow. Yeah. I cannot change the slide.
Arun, did you how about you try, can you try to maybe take off the highlighter? I'm going to blame all the snowstorms and the upcoming snowstorm in Maine for the technical difficulties this morning. Arun,
Mm-hmm.
why don't we try, how about could you actually try to take it out of presenter mode?
How could I do that?
Just go ahead and, do you have any other, looking at, just go ahead and take it out of, I guess, could you do, to your, maybe use your bottom control panel to close out? Yeah, why don't you go ahead and close out the other PowerPoint presentations that are open? And then go back to slideshow and see if...
Okay, so let's start now again. So we just see the natural distribution range of American beech. So now a little bit more on the species. So beech is one of the major tree species of northern hardwoods. So we have in northern hardwoods we got sugar maple, we got birch, and then American beech. So among the deciduous species, we can say that beech is one of the major deciduous species of this forest type. Beech is extremely shade tolerant species. So those who are not familiar with this terminology, shade tolerant, which means that beech can survive and grow or can maintain a minimum growth when we do not have enough light at the understory. So if you can see the second picture, we do not have a lot of light available at the understory. In such condition, not every species can survive because plants need light to assimilate the carbon and produce foods to survive and grow. But species like beech, they can maintain the growth and survivability at the shade, So that's why this species has an advantages to grow in northern hardwoods relative to other species which are more shade intolerant. Beech can grow slowly, so it's a slow-growing species. So when we have a very open-up canopy, lot of lights available in such a condition, beech cannot, compete well with other more shade-intolerant species like yellow birch or even sugar maple. So who can grow more, faster than American beech when we have enough light availability. So you can see that when we have enough open at the canopy and more lights, that gives sugar maple and yellow birch a better advantageous condition than beech. But beech will prefer a more shade understory, and that will give a beech and more advantages to grow and survive. Beech can reproduce by seeds as well as by sucker, which is advantageous characteristics for beech relative to the associated species, and the tree can live, even 300 to 400 years. So now looking at associated species, we have mainly sugar maple, yellow birch, and then we also have red maple and other conifer species in northern hardwoods. So mainly when we talk about northern hardwoods, we talk about American beech, sugar maple, and yellow birch, the three associated major species of this forest. Relative to American beech, sugar maple, and yellow birch are more shade intolerant, and they are also another factor that favors beech is beech is also less palatable for the browsers like white-tailed deer and moose. They prefer sugar maple and birch relative to beech. So that also favors in competition. We will come back to that more later. There's a phenomena that makes beech commercially less desirable, which is beech bug disease. And if you see in this map that we have this disease that expanded in this northeast and over the last 70 years. So beech bug disease started from Nova Scotia, Canada, and it's moving far south through the northeast United States. And now we see beech bug disease almost everywhere in Maine and New York, in Vermont, New Hampshire, even in Pennsylvania. And then we see that it even goes down to Tennessee, and we also have in lake states. So this is really a factor that affecting the growth and survivability of American beech. So what's the worst thing of beech bug disease is that it kills tree very slowly, but it reduces the growth and also affects the wood quality. So when we have a stand with beech, but every tree is infected by the disease, we actually have a stand with very, low, low value timbers and low graded wood. So what is happening that we are having expansion of beech, and the beech and the stand dominated by beech is actually stand dominated by beech bug disease infected beech. So we are not having just beech, but timbers which are deteriorated by this disease. Now, if we look at these northern hardwoods, so this is a picture I took from a presentation of Professor Tony D'Amato, and I would strongly encourage you to see his presentation that he gave last year at the webinar, where he covered very extensively on northern hardwoods and this species, beech, maple, birch, and he also talked on the management, so harvesting and the functional traits. He provided lots more details on the functional traits of all these three species and their responses to different harvesters. So my plan is not to repeat what he already presented. So I will briefly talk on northern hardwoods and the harvest and the silviculture that we have over the last 3-4 decades, and then the natural disturbances as well. And then I will move more on my research where I look, I look the regeneration and then the stands over time. So here you can see from this picture that this is really a typical northern hardwood stands where you see that understory. We do not have a lot of lights at the understory. We have trees of different sizes. We see the leaves of beech. We see the sugar maple, and we see very dense stands. So, like I said, is a forest of tolerant species. So we do not have a forest. We do not have a condition where extreme shade intolerant species like trembling aspen, like white pine can grow and survive. So this is a stand where we do not have a lot of light so that shade intolerant species can utilize the condition. So even maple and birch are more shade intolerant than beech, but they are also relatively shade tolerant species. Now, if we look the disturbances in this forest, we do not really have, stand replacing disturbances. For example, the fire or something like spruce birdworm that kills entire stands at the large scale. But here we have, beech bug disease that kills a tree over a long period of time slowly, and when a tree died by beech bug disease, it creates a small canopy gaps. Then we have also small-scale wind throw. We have tree mortality by maturity, by senescence. Then looking at harvesting, so we mostly in northern hardwoods people use single tree selection, group selection, different shelter root cuttings, and then the diameter limit harvesting. So you can see here that all the harvesting operations that used in northern hardwoods are small scale. So we do not really have a large scale clear cut. So that's also, maintained dense stand condition. I mean, less lights for the regeneration. So that's why we have the dominance of shade-tolerant species like beech, maple, and yellow birch. That's why we also see more yellow birch in northern hardwoods than paper birch. Paper birch is more shade intolerant, and so that's another reason we see more yellow birch in northern hardwood than paper birch. Here is some literature I put for here. I would recommend you to go and have a look if you are interested to know more details. We got a lot of research done by Dr. Ralph Nyland, and then Bill Lake, and then people also from Quebec. They provided some understanding and important knowledge on American beech, versus the other associated species, the beech responses in terms of available light and in terms of other stand level condition like soil acidification, a lot of factors that promotes beech relative to the other associated species. Then we also have a knowledge on experiment that used herbicide and how beech and sugar maple responded to the herbicide. So I would really encourage you to have a look on this literature, because we already have a lot of research done on beech. But one of the things that we miss in this literature, that these are mostly small-scale experimental study. So what we really miss now is a larger scale, a broader scale landscape level study, and also long-term responses. So when we do not really have long-term responses to those silvicultural treatment and also the herbicide treatment and so on. So now I will give you more specifically, based on literature, that what are the factors that favoring beech versus the other associated species. So like I said, beech has a greater ability to grow and survive in deep shade. So when we do not have a lot of light at the understory, beech can survive better than the sugar maple and yellow birch. Because we do not have a stand replacing disturbances like forest fire or spruce birdworm, and we do not have a clear-cut harvesting, that creates small canopy gaps, and so that favors the extreme shade-tolerant beech. Then we have beech bug disease-induced mortality, and that also creates small gaps at the canopy, and that maintains beech dominance at the understory. Beech bug disease also promotes the suckering, because when a tree dies, it starts suckers, it produces suckers, so that also maintains the beech dominance at the understory. Beech can reproduce vegetatively, which are more vigorous than seed-originated stems. So if you look this paper, Boudet and Messier 2008, they demonstrated that a beech seedlings that from sucker is more vigorous and more grow, have the ability to grow in terms of lateral growth and have the ability to survive in shade better than a seedling originated from seeds. So this is an advantageous point for American beech relative to the other associated species. And then when we do harvesting, like logging, we sometimes create damage to the roots, and that also promotes suckers of beech. So, during logging, any kinds of damage to roots will favor beech suckers. Then the herbivore preference, so white-tailed deer and moose, they prefer sugar maple and yellow birch over beech. So that's another advantageous point for beech. And then there are several abiotic factors as well. So there is research done on abiotic factors and how that favors beech versus sugar maple. And you can see here that increased soil acidification, increased carbon at the atmosphere, higher temperature in the growing season, higher precipitation, and the elevation when we have this all favors beech than the sugar maple. So when we have more carbon at the atmosphere that we all often talk because of the climate change, beech has the ability to assimilate carbon higher than the sugar maple. Beech can also grow higher when we have the higher temperature and precipitation during the growing season. And the recent paper that I put here was in 2017. They documented that they found the upslope expansion of American beech in all mountain areas of Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, and in New York. So if you look at this paper, this Watson et al. 2017, you will see that beech is expanding upward, and then we have the red spruce, which is going down slope. So we have upslope expansion of American beech, and then some conifer species towards the down of the elevation. So now I just put here some current knowledge gaps. So what we have now, so we do not really know the large scale patterns, the presence and abundances of American beech and the associated species. So we have many studies that done at the small scale, experimental level, but we do not really have a broad scale knowledge on what is happening over the entire northeastern region. Then we also do not know the broad scale view on structural characteristics of a stand where we have beech. So for example, a stand where we have beech as a minor component, and this stand where beech is a dominant species, so the major component. So characteristics of these two different stand types. And then what are the factors that we know there are factors that we just discussed, but what are the factors that favoring at the broad landscape level the expansion of beech? And then, like I said, that most of this study, I think probably almost all studies, they look at short-term responses to silvicultural treatments. But we do not know that this present understory dominance of beech will be maintained, and they will be successful enough to recruit into larger sized individuals like saplings or trees. So we do not have the long-term knowledge to silvicultural treatment. So we know that when we do a single tree selection, we see that there are more beech at the understory. But this is like 5 to 10 years response. But what will happen on those beech seedlings 20 years later? Will the sugar maple perform better the long term? That's something clearly missing in the literature. And then we have several treatments of herbicides that done different areas of Northeast, like in New York, in New Hampshire, but the response could vary, the response could vary regionally. So, for example, somewhere we have more browsers, they could minimize the effect of herbicide. So we need to know regional responses to herbicide treatment. So, addressing these knowledge gaps, my first analysis is to see the temporal changes in terms of presence and abundances of beech, maple, and birch across different ecological provinces and states of northeastern USA. I will come back to the ecological provinces later, so I will explain what I mean by ecological provinces. So background and objectives of this analysis is to provide and is to understand the long-term changes. So over the last 30 years, how the seedlings or saplings of beech have changed in terms of its presence and abundance relative to the other associated species which are more desirable, like sugar maple, red maple, and birch. and then also to see the landscape spatial patterns. So where at the landscape we see the expansion of beech over the last 30 years, so to identify the spatial expansion. So for this analysis, I use US Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis, FIA data. I have a measurement of 68,411 sample plots, which covers the entire forest land area of Maine, New Hampshire, New York, and Vermont. The measurement period is from 1983 to 2014, so you can see the long 32 years. And then I got 4 ecological provinces in this region. And then what I did, I modeled the presence and abundances, so relative and absolute abundances, and the presence, which is presence or absence of American beech, sugar maple, red maple, and birch saplings over time, states, and ecological provinces. So here, I considered saplings. FIA saplings are 1 to 5 inches at DBH. Okay, so now we'll see some results. So this is the result of sapling presence over the past 3 decades in the entire Northeast, so all 4 states. So if we look at these 4 figures, we see the first figure is American beech, and then the red maple, sugar maple, and birch. We see the 4 colors, we see the 4 lines with different colors. So Maine is a red one, and then New Hampshire is green, New York is blue, and then purple is Vermont. So we have in x-axis, we see the time. So we have from 1983 to 2014. And then we have on the y-axis, we see the percentage. So it's like 0.05 means 5% of total forest land areas, and then to 25% of total forest land areas. So here, if you see the 2 lines are shorter, which is New York and Maine, relative to Vermont and New Hampshire, which just means that we do not have the measurements for New York and Maine from 1983. So we have measurement for Maine is from 1995, and for New York is from 1993. So now if we compare the 4 lines in terms of the presence of beech, we see that Vermont, the beech presence to, has increased from 8% of total plots, total forest land areas, to almost 19% over the last 32 years. And you can see, like, beside the Maine, all 3 states, we have the expansion of beech into newer plots. So beech, relative to 1980s and 90s, now we have in greater number of FIA plots has beech than what we had in 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So we see that in all 3 states, Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York, we have significant beech expansion. And now if you compare these lines in other 3 species, for example, if you see red maple, we see that in New Hampshire, we have a greater reduction in red maple presence. But in Maine, we have a expansion of red maple. So in Maine, we do not see the beech expansion, but we see the red maple expansion. And the 2 other states, the species remains almost stable. We look the sugar maple. We see here that in Vermont and in New Hampshire, we have a decrease of sugar maple over time. So now, if we compare in 1980s and in Vermont and New Hampshire, now we have fewer plots. Now we have sugar maple than what we had in 1980s and 90s. But in New York and Maine, they remain stable. So they haven't changed significantly. If we look birch, we see the 3 states, they are stable, but they decreased in New Hampshire. Okay, Now we will see the relative abundance. So relative abundance is a percentage of total saplings. And we again have the 4 figures. So we have beech, red maple, sugar maple, and birch. And we have the 4 estates, the same colors that we have seen the earlier figures. We have the same time, so 83 to 2012. And now we have y-axis the percentage. So percentage of total saplings at a plot. So the first analysis, when we look the presence, we look the entire northeastern forest. So we look all FI plots of the 4 estates. But now, because of relative abundance, we look only the plots of northern hardwoods. So this northern hardwoods is the forest that dominated by beech, maple, and birch. So where we have over 80% of the total stem basal area dominated by beech, sugar maple, red maple, and birch. So this is specifically northern hardwoods. So now we can see that we have already seen from the previous figures that beech is expanding to new forest areas, so where we did not have beech, but now we have beech. And now here we see that where we had beech, now beech is expanding in absolute and relative abundance. So you can see like beech was in 1980s, there are some areas where we have beech was 10 to 20% of total saplings or beech, but now they expanded to over 35% in Vermont. And you can see in New York it moves to 40%. Then in 1993 it was like around 25%. In Maine there is an increase, but it's not as drastic as we see in 3 other states. So what do we now understand, that beech is not only expanding to new forest areas, because we see an increasing presence of beech in entire Northeast, but also where we have beech, beech is also expanding locally in terms of abundance. So it's expanding to new forest areas as well as is expanding locally in northern hardwoods. And now you again, if you compare the red maple, sugar maple, and birch, you see sugar maple almost in all states. The sugar maple is decreasing in relative abundance. So the line is not as drastic, is not a big fall, but you see they are in decreasing trend, as well as in birch also. You see in New Hampshire is there's a decrease of abundance of birch saplings. Red maple.
Arun, just a quick question while you're speaking about birch. A question came in is are you talking about all species of birch or just yellow birch?
All species of birch, yes.
Thank you.
All species of birch. And then we see the red maple. We see here in New Hampshire and New York, we have a decreasing trend, but in Maine and Vermont, they remain stable in terms of relative abundance. So just to say again, that first we look expansion to new areas, which was by presence and absence, and now we are looking when they are present, how they are expanding in terms of abundance. Now we look spatially. So here you see the first measurement in Maine in 1995 and New Hampshire in 83, New York in 93, and Vermont in 83. And then the latest measurement of FIA, so the last 5 years, 10 to 14. So there are 4 different colors you see in the map. So green areas means there were no beech. Red areas, red dots means there's a beech more than 67%. Yellow means more between 34 to 66%, and the purple is 1 to 33%. So if you look spatially, you see that this Adirondack region and other mountain region, we have a greater expansion of beech. So you can, if you compare the New York here, if you compare New York here, here, and then here you see that we have lots more red dots than what we had before, 20 years before. If you compare the Vermont here and to here, you can see that we have a lot of beech-dominated areas that increased. As well as if you compare the New Hampshire, this region, and New Hampshire here, we can see that there are more yellow and red dots than what we had in 1983. But the main, you see, there's nothing changed at all, so it remains more or less stable. So we can see there are 3 states we have expansion of beech, not in Maine. So now we can see the, maybe I have to clean this thing. Okay, it's again stuck because I use the drawing. Yeah, it's because I use the drawing, it's stuck again. So maybe I should not use the drawing anymore.
I don't know. Yeah,
We have
Arun, I'm
to
not sure.
start again. We have to start again, I think.
I'm wondering, Arun, is there an opportunity maybe to close a couple of the other programs that you have open on the bottom of your desktop there?
I think they are not really a program, so they are just files. Okay, so now it's working. So now if we look the ecological provinces, there are 4 ecological provinces we got in Northeast. So we have ecological province called Alpine Mixed, which is mostly the mountain areas, high elevation areas of the Northeast. And then we have Northeastern Mixed, so which is these green zones. So the main difference between the Northeastern Mixed and Alpine Mixed is the elevation. So these are higher elevation forests cover than the Northeastern Mixed. But if you look the species composition, they are more or less similar. So we have spruce fir as well as northern hardwoods in Northeastern Mixed as well, and also in Alpine Mixed. If we look the eastern broadleaf, this is here we get different species composition. So we got more oak and ash than the spruce fir. So we have less spruce in eastern broadleaf and Midwest broadleaf, these red ones, than the Alpine Mixed and Northeastern Mixed. So Midwest broadleaf is more different than the 3 other ecological provinces. This Midwest broadleaf is more similar to forest of far west, like lake states. So this is the starting point of Midwest broadleaf. So here we have a little part of Midwest broadleaf, which is mostly dominated by hardwood species. Now, if we look, the climatic condition of these 4 ecological provinces, we have, you can see the Midwest broadleaf, which is red, and the Eastern broadleaf, which is yellow. We have higher temperatures. And the Alpine Mixed, we have a lower temperature. But you can see in all 4 ecological provinces, there is a slight increasing trend of temperature that you can see here. In all 4 ecological provinces, we have slight increase in temperature, mean annual temperature. If we look the precipitation, although Alpine Mixed has lowest temperature relative to other 3 ecological provinces, we have higher precipitation in Alpine Mixed. So you can see the precipitation trend is almost similar or identical in 3 ecological provinces. But in Midwest broadleaf, we have a lower precipitation, which is because of some drought phenomena that happened in Midwest broadleaf. So overall, you can see that alpine mixed is an ecological province which has a lower temperature but higher precipitation, whereas the northeastern mixed and eastern broadleaf, we have a more or less similar condition in terms of precipitation, but eastern broadleaf is higher in terms of temperature. So now if we look the results by ecological provinces, we have 4 species: so American beech, red maple, sugar maple, and birch. We have the sapling presence, the time 1983 to 2014, and the 4 colors represent alpine mixed is red, eastern broadleaf is green, Midwest broadleaf is blue, and northeastern mixed is purple. So what we see in beech, they are expanding in 3 ecological provinces, but more in alpine mixed ecological province. So we have a greater increase in the mountainous region of the Northeast. And if we compare these red lines with other species, you can see the sugar maple in red line is in decreasing trend, birch red line is in decreasing trend, and red maple is in decreasing, but not as drastic like the 2 other species, birch and sugar maple. So clearly this is the region, the alpine mixed ecological province, where we have the beech expansion. The 2 other ecological provinces where we have an increasing beech, but not significant. You see, this is not a really big changes. And in the Midwest broadleaf, where we do not really have a lot of beech, only like 2% of the total areas remains stable. Red maple in 3 provinces, they remain stable, but not in eastern broadleaf. So they are decreasing in eastern broadleaf, which is mostly in the New York and the southern part of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Now if we go and see the relative abundance, like we have seen by states, now we see by ecological provinces. So these are the areas where we have dominance of these 4 species. So this is not the entire Northeast, but where we have the dominance of these 4 species. So we can see in alpine mixed ecological province, so beech is also expanding locally. So they are not expanding to newer forest areas, but they are also expanding when they are present. So you see that the relative abundance increased from like 16 to like 45% over the last 32 years, which is quite a remarkable change in terms of the relative abundance. So they are local dominance. So when they are present, they are really increasing their dominance in terms of the abundance relative to the other 3 species. We see here that relative abundance has increased in 3 ecological provinces for American beech, not in Midwest broadly. And then if we look at the red maple, we see that they are decreasing in eastern broadleaf, but they increased in northeastern mixed ecological province. Sugar maple and birch, they remain more or less stable in terms of relative abundance, but they have some decreasing trend in, like in eastern broadleaf, we see the negative trend for birch and also for sugar maple.
Varun, just a quick clarifying questions come in around when you talk about relative abundance. Are we talking about sapling abundance or something else?
Yes, we are all talking about sapling abundance. So these are all saplings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So the conclusion of this analysis, so we see that the presence and abundances of American beech has increased over the past 32 years. But the presence and abundance of sugar maple, red maple, and birches have decreased or remain stable in most of these forest land areas. We see in Maine, beside Maine, beech expansion has increased across forest land areas of 3 other states. and also expansion is greater in alpine mixed ecological provinces relative to the other ecological provinces. And this alpine mixed is mainly the association of all the mountain areas. So now I can take some questions if you have, and then we can move to other stories.
Great, thanks, Arun. One other question that has come in, referring back to the beginning of your talk, do you think that the fact that adult trees are diseased or stressed, that root sprouting and root sprout growth is increased as a response to stress in the parent tree?
That's a very good question. I think there's a paper, there's a study done by Houston, 2001. It's a Forest Service. It's not a peer-reviewed publication, but it's a Forest Service publication. And there he reported that when we have a disease-infected beech tree, they produce suckers, but the number of suckers are fewer than a disease-resistant beech tree. So when we do harvesting of a healthy beech trees, they will produce more suckers than a beech tree died by disease. So, it is not only beech bug disease, but the other stand level factors, for example, the other, mortality or wind throw that creates small gaps at the canopy, they also favors the advanced seedlings of beech relative to the advanced seedlings of sugar maple and birches. So when we are looking the saplings, which are relatively larger sized than seedlings, we also view the the recruitment success of beech relative to the other species. So one of the way to look sapling is because we also can talk about the recruitment success. So it's not only the sucker formation, but also the competition that beech was successful against the associated species. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's it for the questions right now. Just a quick reminder to participants, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and use the question box on the GoToWebinar side panel to submit those early questions. But everyone, that's all the questions that we have at this time.
Okay, so you think I can move on now?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. So the next story that I will talk, which is stand structural and compositional characteristics where we have beech. So before, so far we talk all the forests of northeastern USA, and now we will talk the stands where we have beech. So where we have beech, I consider only those plots to know the structural and compositional characteristics that's supporting the beech presence and abundance. The background and objectives. So we need to know for to adapt our silviculture and to better manage the system. We need to know the structure of the stand, so the overstory of the stands, and also the abiotic factor associated with these stands, where beech is present, just present as a minor component, versus beech is a dominant component at the understory. So we need to know. So that was my main question, that what are the stand level characteristics where beech is a minor component versus what are the stand level characteristics where beech is a major component. And then what are the factors driving that dominance over time. And then to look, that stand type which we can define as a beech dominated stand type, and how frequently is. The question is whether the beech dominated stand type presence has increased over time or not. So, for example, in 1980s or 90s, we have a plot, or we have a stand where beech was a minor component. But what happened? All those plots in now, like in 15 or 20 years later, is the beech become a major component of that stand type? So if so, then we should have a greater presence of beech dominated stand type over time. So that was the hypothesis, to test whether the beech dominated stand type presence has increased over time or not. So to perform this analysis, I again considered the FIA data of the 4 states of Northeast, so Maine, New Hampshire, New York, and Vermont. And now I considered the measurement period of 1999 to 2015, which was because now I want to look everything, so seedlings, saplings, as well as the overstory. Before the other analysis I just presented, where I only looked the saplings, but the plots that were measured in 1980s and early 1990s were not measured for seedlings, so I was not able to look the seedlings, for the entire 1980s to 2015. So that's why I had to minimize my time and to fix that to 1999 to 2015, because I wanted to look seedlings, saplings, and overstory all together. The first objective is to classify all plots or all stands, if we can say, by the characteristics of seedling, sapling, live, and dead overstory to identify beech-dominated stand type. So to group, all the plots where we have beech. So first objective is to select all the FI plots where we have beech. The second is to group those plots to identify beech-dominated plots or the stand. If we say FI plot is a stand, so to identify beech-dominated stand, and then to model the occurrence or the presence of beech-dominated stand over time to see whether the beech-dominated stand's presence has increased over time or not. And then also to find the associated biotic and abiotic factors that driving the increasing abundance of beech-dominated stand type over time. Okay, so first, what we did, just to show you the analysis, the way I classify the plots. So this is called clustering. So I took all the FI plots where we have beech and then grouped them. So here you see I created 4 groups. So group 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see all the FI plot inside of each of these groups. So we form 4 groups considering all the FI plots where we have beech, at least one beech. Okay, so now you see there are 4 groups. There are 4 groups of bar plots. So this is like a seedling density, stems per hectare of 4 different groups. And then this is sapling density, then live tree over tree basal area, and then dead tree basal area. I consider 4 group of species. So first is American beech, and then commercial hardwoods. So commercial hardwoods, I mean sugar maple, yellow birch, paper birch, northern red oak, ash, all of them together. So all the desirable, commercially desirable species. And then the other hardwoods is mainly all the species except beech and commercial hardwoods. So other hardwoods is actually dominated by 3 maple species, so mountain maple, striped maple, and red maple. And then we have softwoods, so all softwoods together. So if we consider the all softwoods and commercial hardwoods as a desirable species, and we can also consider American beech and other hardwoods are less desirable species. So these are American beech is a red color, commercial hardwoods is a green one, other hardwoods is a blue one, and softwood is purple one. So now, based on these characteristics of seedling, sapling, live overstory, and dead overstory, I gave a name to each group. You can see the first group where we have a lot of taller red bars, seedlings layer and sapling layer, which is dominated by beech. I gave a name beech-dominated stand type. So this is the group. I said this is beech-dominated group. The second group where we have commercial hardwood dominated. And the third group is other hardwood dominated. And the fourth group is softwood dominated. So I actually defined the group names by the seedling and sapling layers, not by the overstory composition, because you can see the overstory is dominated by commercial hardwoods and softwood species almost in all groups. So you can see even where we have beech. So these are all the stands where we have beech. Is not all forest areas of Northeast. Is the only forest areas where we have beech. So try to remember this. So please do not consider that this is the entire forest area and we are looking the commercial hardwoods of entire northeastern forest. We are not. We are only looking commercial hardwoods of the forest where we have beech. So these are actually the forest areas where we have a presence of beech. So what we see here that the one group where we define as a beech-dominated groups because of this dominance in seedlings and sapling layers. But this, if you see the overstory is dominated by commercial hardwoods. So we have a greater presence of commercial hardwoods in beech-dominated groups. So clearly you see that overstory doesn't tell the understory at all. So even we have sugar maple or birch that dominates the overstory, we have beech dominance at the understory and midstory. If we say sapling is a midstory and seedling as understory. And another thing you can see here that the total seedling density in beech-dominated group is lower than the total seedling density of other groups. And one of the things you can see here, which I will interpret more with the factors that we will come back and in other results. So, but here you can see one thing: the total overstory basal area of these groups is higher than the three other groups. So when we have a greater overstory basal area, which also means we have a greater dense stands, which also means we have a lower light availability for the understory species, understory plants. So when we have a lot of overstory trees, that creates little growing space as well as little food for the seedlings and saplings, and this is why we see total seedling density is fewer. But because of this denser condition, we see beech likes that condition. So the two things that we can count from here is one, that we have a greater basal area, and the second thing is greater basal area creates a condition for fewer seedlings, but that fewer seedlings number will be dominated by beech. So when we have a dense overstory, we actually favoring beech dominance. So beech presence, all the plots when we have beech presence, but the plots with a greater overstory basal area, we see the greater presence of beech in the seedling and sapling layers. Yeah.
Arun, this is Kate, and I hate to interrupt, but just looking at the time, I'm going to have to give you about a 5-minute warning or so.
We have only 5 more minutes?
We do, yeah. I know that I'm sure you have more to cover, and I just recognize that how quickly
do you think it's a 1 hour? I thought it's a 1 hour talk.
Yep, it's 10:30.
Because we had the interruption. Okay, so I will be faster now because we had, the interruption with the connection. Okay, so I will be faster now. Yeah.
Specifically, there's been a couple of questions around management. I don't know if specifically there was a question around effective control of heavy beech suckering in the understory, either mechanical or herbicide. I don't know if that's if you.
Okay, so I will be moving quickly now. Okay, so I will be going quickly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now if we look the occurrence of those stand types, so we see here the 4 figures. So we see the percentage in y-axis, the percentage of total areas, and the x-axis is the measurement years. So we have from 1999 to 2015. and the 4 states. So what we see that beside the main, main is the red line, so there's not so much beech-dominated forest stands in Maine, but in 3 other states, the beech-dominated stand types had increased greatly. So you can see in Vermont, in last 16 years, we have a greater increase in beech-dominated stand types. And then if you compare with commercially hardwood-dominated stand type, we see is a decreasing trend in Vermont, as well as in New Hampshire and in New York. But in Maine, commercial hardwood-dominated stand type had increased. If you see the other hardwood and softwood-dominated stand type, softwood-dominated stand type remain more or less stable, but other hardwood-dominated stand type decreased over time. But pay attention on y-axis, there is more forest, and the 40%, you can see the 40% of total forest, over 40% of the total forest of Vermont is now currently dominated by beech-dominated stand type, so which is really a big result. Now, if we see the factors, so we can see with the elevation, with the increase of elevation and with the increase of precipitation, we have a greater occurrence of the beech-dominated stand type. So when beech-dominated stand type are occurring more at the higher elevation and with the more precipitation versus the other stand type. And then the second thing, if we look at the biotic factor, so here we have in x-axis, we have this specific basal area. For example, if we look the overstory basal area of beech and then the beech-dominated stand type, so what we found here, that when we have a greater beech presence at the overstory, we have greater beech presence at the understory. And when we have greater beech stand basal area, we also have a greater presence of beech at the understory. So both stand basal area as well as beech basal area favoring beech dominance at the understory. So give you a total the conclusion. We created 4 different stand types, and they represent 27% of the total forest areas of northeastern USA. And then elevation, precipitation, overstory basal area of beech, and the total basal area is favoring beech dominance. Okay. This is taking my time is again stuck.
Arun, I wonder if is it possible maybe to just use the white arrow to highlight things as so that we can.
Yeah. Okay.
I apologize for that glitch.
Yeah. And now I will talk the glyphosate herbicide experiment very quickly. In 2006, Robert Wagner, he established this experiment. So he has sprayed glyphosate, and then 9 years later, I measured. So the experiment was established in 2006, and then 9 years later, we measured the seedling composition as a function of glyphosate rate and overstory basal area. So if we look the result, we see that, like the 3 figures here, we have a regeneration density, stems per hectare, relative density, and the average height of seedlings. And then we have 4 species of beech, other hardwoods, sugar maple, and softwood. So other hardwood means all the hardwood species beside beech and sugar maple. So beech is a red color and sugar maple is a purple color. So we see that with the increasing of glyphosate rate, we have an increasing density of sugar maple, both in absolute and the relative terms. But when we look the height, we see the sugar maple height is not significantly different than the other species. So, so glyphosate favored the density of sugar maple, but not the height. So now if we look the overstory basal area, so we again have a density, absolute, relative, and the height. We see the overstory basal area in the x-axis. So increasing overstory basal area did not really affect the density of this species, absolute and relative, but increasing overstory basal area negatively affect the height growth of all species. So you can see that increasing overstory basal area, the negative relationship with the height growth of all species. But the main message of this analysis is the browsing. So you can see that a lot of sugar maple, which is the green, seedlings were heavily browsed. And this is why we do not see the height growth of sugar maple. So although glyphosate promotes a lot of sugar maple seedlings in terms of density, it did not favor its height growth because of the browsing. So take home here that glyphosate was useful to increase the abundance of sugar maple, but the browsing pressure need to be controlled to promote the height growth of sugar maple. Now I will provide the management recommendation, which is probably the most important. So first of all, we need to know the demography of our forests. We can do that by establishing some regeneration plots. Then we can tally the regeneration by size, so by species and size. And then we can stratify the plots by desirable species versus non-desirable species to determine how many of plots is currently dominated by beech versus how many of the plots currently dominated by desirable species. So if you can, we need to know the extent of the area that currently dominated by undesirable, which is beech, versus the extent of the area is dominated by desirable species. And then we can identify how much of this area. So if it is, that will be needed to decide on the treatment that we need to use to control those aggressive beech regeneration. And so we cannot do overstory harvesting until the desirable species will have an advantageous position at the understory. So any kind of overstory removal will not work if beech is dominating at the understory. And then the choice of regeneration control treatment should be based on the magnitude of the dominance of undesirable species, the extent of the area, and the cost associated with the treatment. So for example, like Nyland's 2006 paper, he said that when you have undesirable species like 500 stems per acre, you can use girdling or cutting, which will be more cost effective. But if you have a more than 500 stems per acre of undesirable species, then you probably need to use herbicide spray. We also have to protect our regeneration area from browsing, or we have to hunt the deers to reduce the deer density. We cannot completely remove the harvesting, the overstory until the desirable species got the advantageous position in terms of height. And we also need to reduce the damage of roots, because root damage of American beech will promote the sucker. So either we could use small feller buncher machines, or we can do the harvesting during the winter. Now to give you a conceptual figure, so let's imagine we have a forest with a different composition of beech. So less than 10%, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and more than 75. So yellow means sugar maple and red means beech. And so like this condition at the down, we do not have a lot of beech, so we do not really need a treatment. And then here we have a minor component of beech, so we can do herbicide injection. Here we need more, stronger herbicide application than here. And then if the condition is like this, so we have more than 50% with beech, then we have to do this.
Arun, this is Kate. It sounds like your audio has changed a little bit.
My audio?
We lost you for a minute there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Shall I go back?
I just wanted to alert you to the fact that we had lost your audio for a second there.
Okay, so I was just saying, so you can see this. You can see this conceptual figure. So you can adjust your silvicultural decision to control the beech by looking at the composition of beech versus sugar maple at your stand. So if you have a beech more than 50%, you probably need to use strong, clear-cut harvesting or anti-herbicide application, probably a greater extent. But when the beech component is less than 25%, you probably can avoid the clear cut and can only control your regeneration by using herbicide. Okay, so just to give you a summary, so beech presence and abundance has been increased over the years for many reasons. And then we really need the long-term responses to regeneration control treatments, which is not really understood well, because most of the studies that done so far looked short-term responses. So we really need a long-term research to understand the fate of those seedlings and saplings that currently dominating the understory of northern hardwoods. I mean, all those beech saplings, whether they will be successful enough to dominate the overstory. So we see that there's the overstory which is actually dominating by commercially desirable species, but the understory and midstory is currently dominated by beech. So the question is whether that overstory of commercial species will be replaced by beech in future. So that's really a big question at this moment. So I would like to thank my funding, all the funding organizations that supporting my work and the data, and also my co-researchers. And thanks, and I will take questions. And you can also write me by emails. I will be very happy to give you my feedbacks. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Arun. You shared so much information today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to present some of your research to us. A few of the questions that came in, there was one about the herbicide treatment. Can you talk a little bit more about what that entailed in terms of, was it cut stump, foliar, or basal bark? And then also the concentration of herbicide.
Okay, so can you repeat, please, the question?
Yeah, so I guess the first part of the question was, what was the herbicide treatment that was used? Was it cut stump, foliar, or basal bark? And then the concentration.
Yes, it's foliar, glyphosate, herbicide.
Okay. Do you know the concentration?
And concentration, we had a different concentration because we control the concentration to see the response. So I because of my publication, I converted to the metric system, so kg per hectare, but I can provide the English units.
That would be great. If you don't mind, there were a couple of questions around the conversion of metric. If you wouldn't mind following up with me by email and providing
yes,
that,
I can do that.
the conversion.
I can do that. Yeah, because these are all submitted papers, so these are. I'm sorry, I should have think about that earlier. Yeah.
No problem. I'm happy to, for participants, I'm happy to go ahead and email out after
so
the webinar.
This is like kg per hectare, but the original treatment was done in pounds per gallon. So.
Great. I look forward to.
I mean gallons per acre. Yeah.
Okay, great. I look forward to getting that information, and then I'll pass it along. There was another question here. Have you seen leprechaun poles used, or cut beech above the first branch to decrease stump sprouting? And does that work? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It looks like leprechaun.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with this term, but I would. I would recommend the Nyland et al. 2006, the paper I forwarded, which is on controlling beech expansion using different types of treatment. So he talked about individual stem treatment by girdling, by cutting, by injection, and then also by different types of herbicide spray. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. I'm working here over the last year and a half, so I'm still learning.
But, I wonder, would you mind providing me a link to that study that I could share with the participants?
I can send you the paper. Yeah.
That would be great. I'll send that out by email as well.
Yeah.
I think, let's hear it. Just looking quickly to see if there's any other questions. There was a comment here just of note for folks in Vermont. There was a question about whether herbicide, aerial herbicide is actually legal in Vermont. I don't know the answer to that question, but certainly something for folks to look into if they're interested in exploring that any further. I don't know, it sounds like it might be a different situation in Maine, but again, there was questions about whether or not that was legal. The aerial herbicide is legal here in Vermont.
Okay.
That that's it for questions. Again, everyone, I thank you so much for your time today. You shared a wealth of information with us. It's clear there's more research to be done. So perhaps we'll have to have you back when we have another opportunity to dive into this a little bit further. So with that, folks, again, I want to thank everybody for your participation in the webinar today and remind you that at the end of the webinar, you will be receiving a link asking you to complete a survey. If you don't have time to complete that this morning, I recognize we've gone over a few minutes here, you will be getting an email from GoToWebinar, so feel free to just go ahead and follow up and complete that survey through the email link. Lastly, we are still in the process of identifying our March webinar, but I wanted to let you know that it looks like we'll be working with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, and somebody from that organization will be presenting on their new publication on forest adaptation in March. So stay tuned for more information and an announcement with a link to registration for that, but we're planning on continuing the webinar series into March and look forward to your participation. So with that, again, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning, and thank you again for all the participants. I will be in touch.
Kate. Thanks, Kate, for giving me this opportunity, and thanks again. Thanks to all, to hear me. And feel free to ask me question if you have. I will be happy to respond. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Arun. Again, I appreciate your time, and apology for some of the technical issues that we experienced today.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.